why Mr. Murdaugh would commit the crimes he's accused of committing. That, in effect, turned the cross-examination of that witness from dealing with the specific issues in the case to having that witness testify as a character witness for Mr. Murdaugh. Among his other areas of inquiry was his being a loving father, a great provider, financially secure, things of that nature, all indicating an opinion by that witness as to the good character of the defendant, either through direct statements or circumstantially through the evidence that was adduced from that witness. In the court's view, that opened the door for the state to respond by asking questions, as the state did. Hence, the court overruled the objections. In addition to all of that, the objection was totally inappropriate. As the court laid out and reviewed with the parties early in the trial, that objection should be made and the legal basis stated. An objection of totally inappropriate is, in the words of Judge Joe Anderson, in effect, no objection at all. That's not a legal basis for an objection. That summarizes the basis for the court's ruling on that issue as to those questions yesterday. And that character type evidence was not only sought by from Mr. Gibson, but also, was it Loving? But also Mr. Loving. And none of that really implicated Rule 404, 404B. One, it opened the door. Number two, it's 404A type reputation, questioning that the state had a right to respond to per the rules. And thirdly, it addressed an issue raised in the case by the defense. The defense in the case has primarily been the defendant has such a great character that he could not possibly have committed these offenses. That's been a general thread from opening statement throughout. In addition, the defense introduced through that witness, which was also introduced through other testimony in the case by the defendant, that the boating case was a reason for the murders to have occurred. And by the defense inquiring of the witness yesterday as to his knowledge and belief concerning, or his knowledge concerning the boating case, that likewise opened the door for the state to address that issue. And that's the basis for the court's ruling as to opening the door, introducing the boating case, and reputation type evidence that the state had a right to respond. Under Rule 403, yet to be addressed by the court is Rule 404 issues. And those issues will, to some degree, have to be addressed in camera. And I'm wondering if the state has other witnesses to testify as to other things, since we have the jury here ready to go. prior to addressing any other?
Well, we do have first of all, we do have a Snapchat custodian who has flown in that we need to get in so that person can make the flight. Based on how things ended yesterday, I was prepared this morning. We were planning on going forward with some of the witnesses from the law firm, and that's going to, there's certainly stuff beyond 404, but that's also going to put some of the 404 issues squarely into play. So that's kind of where we were planning to go this morning, Your Honor, with the testimony that we have. I can certainly get some more forensic people rolling. I apologize if I sort of misread what we needed to be ready to do, but that's kind of what we focused on last night and are ready to address this morning.
Yeah, well, the court didn't have a lot of time to do jury planning issues, and it might have, the jurors typically come at 9:30. It might have been a better idea had, with greater thought, to have had them come later. And I don't know how long these issues will take to be addressed.
I think with the two law firm witnesses out of the gate, I think once the court has, we could do some very focused in-camera testimony, and I think that for those witnesses, the court can then rule on what's admissible and what's not, and once that's done, then we can get underway with the jury for those witnesses and proceed accordingly. And then, of course, we can certainly have a discussion as far as other witnesses and then perhaps arrange a time to do any other in camera. But I think setting the table with these two witnesses is going to set the table for many of the issues that, whether they're in or out, that the court has to decide.
All right, well, first, as it relates to Rule 404, and Rule 404B states that evidence of other crimes or wrongs is not admissible to prove the character of a person in order to show action in conformity therewith. In other words, not admissible to show propensity to commit the crime or a crime, but it may be admitted for certain other reasons, including motive, identity, intent, and perhaps the existence of a common scheme or plan. Additionally, well, I'll address it later regarding res gestae, but my view of the evidence is that evidence of the other alleged crimes can be introduced in this case to show motive, intent, common scheme and plan. Given the proper analysis as it relates to that evidence being offered. As I indicated earlier, that the court agrees with the view and as expressed by the court in U.S. v. Siegel, 536 Federal 3rd 306, wherein the court addressed the issue of previous crimes involving, previous alleged crimes involving multiple victims, and that the state should be able to pursue its theory of proving that why suddenly, or why some such tragic, the motive for such tragic an occurrence to have taken place on the dates alleged here. And under the federal rule, it goes on to say that evidence of other crimes or bad acts is necessary if it is an essential part of the crimes on trial or where it furnishes part of the context of the crime. This state has not adopted that portion of Rule 404B, but the courts have addressed that issue in some of the cases, particularly one that stands out to me as one of my cases, State v. Frankie Lee McGee from Richland County, in which the res gestae was used as a basis for the courts properly allowing certain evidence, including evidence of commission of an earlier crime, the test being whether it logically relates to the crime with which the defendant is charged. Court states in that opinion under res gestae that one of the accepted bases for the admissibility of the evidence of other crimes arises when such evidence furnishes part of the context of the crime or is necessary to a full presentation of the case, or is so intimately connected with and explanatory of the crime charged against the defendant and is so much a part of the setting of the case and its environment that its proof is appropriate in order to complete the story of the crime on trial by proving its immediate context or the res gestae or the uncharged offense is so linked together in point of time and circumstances with the crime charged that one cannot be fully shown without proving the other, and thus is part of the res gestae of the crime charged. And where evidence is admissible to prove this full presentation of the offense, there is no reason to fragmentize the events under inquiry by suppressing parts of the res gestae. And interestingly, involved in that case, the court held that did not require a 403 analysis. Because the evidence was properly admitted as part of the res gestae, the issue of whether or not a 404B analysis was done was not necessary. And at this point, the court hasn't addressed any particular issue under 404B, but I find that it is admissible provided that the proper scrutiny is done in relation to clear and convincing evidence and a logical relationship to the offense for which we're having this trial. And additionally, as relates to intent, evidence tending to prove a defendant's state of mind or intent at or near the time of the crime is relevant to establish possible guilt. So there are many areas under which it's appropriate for the court to consider admitting this evidence of other crimes, other bad acts, in a manner that does not address or seek to have the jury conclude that it's propensity evidence, and the court will address all of that as we proceed. Yes, sir, Mr. Griffin.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just want to get some arguments on the record for purposes. Yes, as to Your Honor's conclusion that we opened the door by presenting evidence of good character, I would respectfully disagree, and the evidence that we presented was specifically limited to the relationship between the defendant and the victim for which he's accused of murdering. In our view, that is not character witness. That's a factual issue relating to the relationship between the parties. And so I just want to put that on the record. Your Honor puts great emphasis and reliance on U.S. v. Siegel, and that's a federal case. And I just want, and I want to point out that.
I gave the site, federal site, yeah.
Yes, sir.
Federal second, yeah.
The federal site is 536 F 3rd 306.
F third, yes.
Yes, sir. And and it's important to distinguish the federal crimes for which the defendant in Siegel was charged with. First, the defendant, she was charged with murdering the victim to prevent him from reporting fraud, and that's a specific federal statute, 18 U.S.C. 1512 A1C. She's also charged with impending an official investigation by transporting the deceased body across state lines. But further, the indictment alleged a broader scheme and artifice to defraud. And in the indictment, it listed many of the prior crimes that the defendant committed in the federal indictment. And so, and under federal rule 404B, you can prove those up. And then there were others that the court considered they were related to the whole scheme and artifice to defraud. The indictment in this case, Your Honor, is simply on June 7th, 2021, the defendant with malice aforethought murdered Ms. Maggie Murdaugh, murdered Mr. Paul Murdaugh, and used violent weapons in commission of those two crimes. There's no scheme and artifice to defraud here.
You're currently addressing it as if the court ruled based on 404. And the court clearly stated that we have not reached any determination on 404, that the basis of the court's ruling was 403, the boating case, as you introduced through the witness, and opening the door by giving testimony, soliciting testimony of generally good character of the defendant, such that neither of the two witnesses could possibly imagine a scenario under which what would cause this crime to have occurred, and the state is entitled to confront that evidence in the manner in which the court ruled. But you're arguing 404. I cited that for an additional basis to say the court will need to look at all of that as we proceed with evidence of prior bad acts, but the basis of the court's ruling was not 404, but 403, opening the door and responding to the evidence that you adduced.
Yes, sir. I apologize, I misunderstood.
Yes, sir.
Your Honor's.
I did not rule based on U.S. v. Siegel and overruling your objection yesterday.
Fair enough. I guess I would ask for clarification of where we go from here. Is your intentions to have a hearing outside the presence of the jury on their proposed 404B evidence?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Then I can save all the arguments from then. Thank you.
Yes, sir. And again, with regard to planning purposes for the jury, you said a witness, whatever can be done without getting into the 404 or the court's need for an in-camera hearing, where we need to dismiss the jury for whatever period of time that might be. We can press on with what you have otherwise at this time, and whatever that is what we'll hear.
Yes, sir, Your Honor. Like I say, we have one short custodian, and then I think our next witness who's here would be somebody where we would need to address some of the 404. That would be Jeannie Seconder from the law firm. If you give me one moment, I can to confer with my staff, and we can see if we can get some other people rolling so that we can kind of stagger that and continue to have presentations for the jury during the course of the day.
All right. Minutes.
order.
Are you ready to proceed?
Yes, sir. We do have, again, that custodian witness. Then I think we would have to, we are rolling some additional witnesses, but I think at that time we would have to break and do at least the first in-camera witness. Again, I think that may set the table for a lot of subsequent things. And then we can have some additional work outside of any 404 stuff in the afternoon, Your Honor. But certainly happy to do that, or if you want, we can put up some multiple witnesses on the in-camera here today.
So I think as it relates to each alleged bad act, it must be, the court must be informed and proffer and addressed separately. Of course, some may be a series of things occurring almost simultaneously, so that may be a different scenario. But we'll see how it goes. We're ready to proceed with the jury.
Yes, sir, Your Honor.
The jury is present, sir.
All right, thank you. Good morning. Welcome back. Day number 9. State's case, you may call your next witness.
Thank you. State call Heidi Galore.
Raise your right hand, left hand on the Bible. You affirm the testimony about the court in this trial shall be the truth, so help you God. Thank you. Just take a seat in the witness stand. State your name again for the record. Spell your last name, please.
My name is Heidi Galore. Last name is spelled Galore.
Please call. Good morning, Ms. Galore. Where do you work?
Morning. I work for Snap Incorporated.
What are your duties there?
I'm an law enforcement operations lead, so I assist with and help manage a team of folks who respond to law enforcement legal process.
Come forward.
I'm sorry. Sure. Our team responds to legal process submitted to our company, subpoenas, search warrants, that kind of thing.
All right. So you're in charge of responding to search warrants or subpoenas from law enforcement or other legal entities?
Correct.
All right. And briefly, please, what is Snapchat?
Snapchat, it's an application that was created by Snap Incorporated to help people express themselves. People can connect to their friends, people they know, and I guess you could consider it a social networking type of application.
Is social media another word that could be used for Snapchat?
Yes.
Does it give the ability for individuals to send each other messages?
Yes.
Does it give the ability for individuals to send each other pictures or videos?
Yes.
And in the normal course of this business, does Snapchat keep records if the user so chooses?
Yes.
What kind of records does Snapchat keep?
Basic subscriber information, content that was sent to and from folks, IP logs, geolocation, depending on the settings of the user.
Okay. I'm going to show you what's been marked as States Exhibit 305 and 304. I'm going to ask if you recognize these two items.
I do, yes.
And what are you holding?
The paper here is the basic subscriber information for the user that was produced in the search warrant.
And what's that CD?
The CD contains the full production of files that was sent to your agency, requested from the search warrant.
All right, and that was a search warrant from SLED
Yes,
that Snapchat responded to?
correct.
Okay. And you said there was subscriber information on that piece of paper, correct?
Yes,
And is that also located on the CD and the digital records?
yes, yes.
I'm gonna go back to you real quick. And Your Honor, at this time, state remove these injunctions.
No objection, Your Honor.
They're admitted without objection.
I'm gonna hand you back states 304. And you indicated that was subscriber information, is that correct?
Correct.
And can you read for the jury the subscriber information for the information on the account that you provided in response to the search warrant?
Sure. The username is listed here. The username is listed here as Paul9499. Common spelling for Paul. The email address listed here is paulmurdaugh7845@gmail.com. This was created, the account was created on Saturday, May 18th, 2013. There's a creation IP, but it's not listed here. Sometimes it's captured at the time of creation of the account. In this case, it doesn't seem to be. Phone number listed here is 803-842-7845. Display name is listed as Paul Murdaugh, and the status is active.
Okay. And when somebody uses a telephone number, for example, to create a Snapchat account, does Snapchat verify that number?
If the user wants to verify the phone number, yes, they can, but it's not required.
Okay. And what about the email? Is that required?
Not required either, no.
All right. I'm going to hand you State's Exhibit 306. This is already in evidence. And I believe this is a CD. Do you recognize that CD?
Yes, I do.
And have you reviewed the contents of that CD?
Yes, I have.
And what is on the contents of that CD?
It's a video of a subject near a tree, and it's a short video with some audio.
Okay. And did that video, was that part of the full search warrant return that we just talked about?
Yes.
All right. And did you take a look at that video and the records contained in the other CD to determine when that video was first uploaded and first sent?
Yes.
Okay. Well, first of all, let's talk about the upload. Was it uploaded to something called Memories?
Yes.
And can you describe to the jury what is Memories? What does that function with Snapchat?
Memories is kind of like a bucket where you can save your data. You can either create a video or some sort of photo on the app itself and save it to your memories so that it's always there when you need it, or you can upload from your camera, your phone, into memories to then send to folks later, or just have it in there.
So is that a form of saving, like saving something in the cloud?
Correct, yes, it'll be on the server.
All right. And in reviewing these records, did you determine when this account uploaded that particular video to Memories?
Yes, this video was first seen on Memories on June 7th, 2021 at 7:39 hours
Okay.
Eastern.
And does Snapchat also keep a record when an individual sends out a communication?
Yes,
And did you determine in reviewing the records whether, excuse me, that account sent out that particular video?
yes, it was sent on the same day, June 7th, 2021 at 7:56 hours Eastern Time.
All right, thank you. And I'm going to show you, if you look at your monitor in front of you, and I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 306, and see if you recognize it. And did you recognize that video?
That didn't show up on the,
Oh, I'm sorry, can we get the, it on the screen? My apologies. Oops, okay. What's going on now? Try it again. Like that. Can you see the, what's on your screen right now?
Yes.
All right, and I'm gonna play that one more time. Okay, and do you recognize that video, ma'am?
Yes, I do.
All right, and is that video, the video we just discussed that was part of the Snapchat search warrant return?
Yes.
That you just testified was uploaded at 7:39 PM and sent at 7:56 PM?
Yes.
No further questions?
Good morning, ma'am.
Morning.
Can we pull up the Snapchat video, just have it frozen on a screenshot?
Doug?
I think it's plugged into this computer.
All right, that's good.
So this is what, or part of what Snapchat gave to the state on July 6th, is that, of 2021, is that correct?
Correct.
So the state had this on July 6, 2021, in the state's possession,
I believe so, yes.
this information. And you testified that this was uploaded at 7:39 PM on the 7th of June, correct?
Correct.
Is that exactly when this video was shot?
I can't tell that information from the production.
Are you certain that's not something that could be told from the, perhaps the metadata for the video file?
There was no metadata produced for this production. It wasn't requested, so it wasn't produced.
So if someone were to right-click on this video file and you know, where it has various metadata that pops up on the screen, would we see a media created date?
I don't know. I
Well,
wouldn't know.
let's see if we would. Court's indulgence for a moment. Can you see on the screen the metadata for this file?
Yes.
And does it say June the 7th, 2021 at 7:38 p.m.?
Yes.
And so this was shot basically a minute before it was uploaded, is that correct?
It appears so, yeah.
And I'm sorry if that seems picky, but in this case, you know, every minute and every second, you know, can matter. Does Snapchat keep a list of, and I might be getting the terminology wrong, friends or contacts that Paul would have had on Snapchat?
Yes.
Was that list produced?
No.
And why was that list not produced?
It wasn't requested in this case.
And you mentioned earlier geolocation data. Was that produced?
No, not in this case.
And why was that not produced?
I don't believe it was requested.
Is it possible for, I don't know how it works, for some or all of Paul's friends to have access to his location through the app?
Yes, if his settings were, yeah, if he made his settings visible, his geolocation visible to his friends, yes.
And would that information about whether that was, that setting was in place to allow that, is that something that Snapchat would have had available to produce?
I'm not sure I'm not sure about that, if we can see that it's actually turned on or off. Yeah.
Was that requested?
No.
No further questions, Your Honor.
By the state.
No, that's what it said.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
May step down. Yes, sir.
The state's next witness would be Jeannie Seconder.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, there are matters that must be addressed outside of your presence. I do not know exactly how long it would take, but I do not like to have jurors sit in jury rooms just for long periods of time. So we're going to excuse you after you speak with the bailiff. We're going to take a recess with the jury while we deal with these matters. Let's see now, you all have lunch coming at what time? Nobody knows. 1 o'clock, 1:15. All right. Well, we won't need you before lunch. So if you'll go to the jury room and wait for further instructions, but we'll be having you all take a break until around that time. Proceed.
All right, again, the state would call Jeannie Seconder.
Raise your right hand. You affirm the testimony you have to give the court in this trial to be the truth, so help you God. You can take a seat in the witness stand. State your name again for the record. Spell your last name.
My name is Jeannie Seckinger, Seckinger.
Ms. Seconder, how you doing today?
I'm good.
Good. Let me fix this Elmo real quick. You understand we're here right now outside the presence of the jury for an in-camera hearing to determine the admissibility of some of your testimony.
I do.
And just very quickly, if you would, give us a little bit. I'm not going to go through all the background that I went in front of the jury unless Your Honor would like, but give us a little bit about your background and where you currently work, how that led to where you currently work.
Okay. I graduated with a BS in accounting from USC, went to work in an accounting firm for a few years, then switched to industrial at Westinghouse. And in 1999, I came to work at PMPED, which is Peters, Murdaugh, Parker, as a temporary bookkeeper, and that has grown over the years to the office manager, CFO, accountant, anything business and insurance and HR related.
Okay, and that's for whom?
For Peters, Murdaugh, Parker, Elstrop, and Dietrich.
All right, so that's PMPED,
Correct,
and that's the law firm that Alec Murdaugh used to work for?
correct.
Does that have a different name now?
We are now a new entity that's called Parker Law Group LLP.
All right, so just very quickly, you've already kind of said this, but go through sort of the financial side of your job duties as it existed for PMPED back in the relevant time periods.
Okay, so my financial duties are, actually, I have people under me that do the day-to-day processing of checks, but my duties are to balance and reconcile accounts, provide financial statements, help with all tax documents, preparation of taxes, also prepared anything for any government census or surveys that we needed, and anything HR related.
I want to ask you a little bit about the financial structure of how PMPED works, if I could. And if you could explain that a little bit. People often think of lawyers as partners, but are they called partners under the employment agreement that everyone signed?
No, we're called partners when we refer to each other as they're in the business, but for tax purposes, everybody was an owner. It was a C corporation, so everybody's shareholders. And within Peters, Murdaugh, Parker, every employee was a salaried employee, including the partners.
Okay. And did the employment agreement that everyone signed require that any fees or money generated by any partner or lawyer by the firm had to go to the firm?
It did.
And explain to me how, if you're and let's just call them quote partner, if you're a partner, how does the compensation work? What are the elements of compensation as it worked under the PMPED structure back in 2021 and prior?
So every partner received a base salary that they would receive in biweekly payments throughout the year. That was set at a level of about $125,000. The majority of their pay came through an end-of-the-year bonus, which is when we closed out the books and settled on the books. And primarily, after overhead and expenses were met, the net profit was divided amongst those partners. And in a simplified form, it was basically distributed based on a ratio of the fees that they brought in percentage to the total.
Right. But that distribution would not take place until when?
Usually the last week of December.
Yes, sir.
Waters, there's a strike. Can you repeat the previous question for me?
Yes, sir. Going back a second, Joe, we were talking a little bit about the compensation structure for PMPED as it existed in 2021. And if you could, again, explain to the court how that worked. How are partners, and we're going to call them loosely that term, how are they compensated?
Okay, partners are employed salaries who are paid a biweekly paycheck throughout the year with a base salary of $125,000. And at the end of the year, they received a bonus check, usually in the last week of the year, that divided up the remaining profits of the firm based upon the percentage of revenue each attorney brought into the total.
All right, so when fees came in, they're going to be attributed to a particular lawyer, and ultimately that's going to be a percentage of the total revenues, and that's going to determine their percentage of the compensation at the end of the year after all overhead is paid.
Correct.
Is there also some sort of 7.5% fund or fee or something like, or amount that's put aside?
There is. You would take the gross bonuses or the gross fees everybody brought in, less than overhead, and once we get to that number, everybody would throw in a pot 7.5%, and that money was divided back equally among the employees. And then a new percentage was arrived at to determine how much everybody would receive of the net income.
All right, so you have to take care of overhead, right?
Yes.
And what is an overhead, just generally?
Overhead is just basically the expenses to run the business, what it cost us to advance client costs, what it costs to pay our employees, what it costs to rent the building, to provide equipment, office supplies, postage, et cetera.
And that's got to be accounted for, and then you got to account for the 7.5% as well, correct?
That's right.
All right, and then only after that does each partner get compensation based on their relative contribution during that year.
Correct.
Is typically the vast majority of compensation received by a partner at PMPED received in that distribution at the end of the year?
Yes.
And when does that take place?
The last week of the year, generally speaking.
Okay, and what is the point of that goal? Why do you want to sort of clear out all the money and clear the books?
So basically, that we don't want to leave the money in there to be taxed by the corporation because it's a C Corp entity, so the objective is to get it out to the partners and avoid double taxation.
And so because of that, is it up to each individual partner to essentially manage the bulk of their compensation that's received in one lump sum during the course of the next year?
Yes, they need a budget.
All right, let me show you what's been marked for purposes of this hearing as States 310 and see if you recognize that document.
Yes, this is the employment agreement each shareholder/partner would have signed.
Okay. And I just want to direct your attention to number 2, and if you could tell the court what that provision that's signed by all the partners says.
It says the employee accepts such employment and agrees that the employee will devote the employee's entire time and endeavor to the employer's business.
All right. And then number 3, if you could read that to the court, please.
Services for the benefit of the employer. All professional services rendered by the employer shall be rendered as an employee of the employer, and all proceeds and remuneration received therefore shall inure to the employer's benefit.
Okay. Now tell me what that means.
That means that all fees earned should come payable to PMPD.
All right. And so if a lawyer earns fees, is it appropriate at all for those fees to go directly to the lawyer as opposed to going through the law firm?
No,
Is that a hard rule to understand?
no,
Anybody ever have a problem with that rule or not understand it?
no,
Pretty easy and hard and fast rule in that firm, correct?
that's right.
If you get the money written straight to you, what is that?
The money's taken straight to you?
Yeah.
That would be stealing it.
Stealing. Please, could y'all turn the screen for me? All right. So, is that better? So, could you see that, Ms. Seconder?
Yes,
All right, so 2 and 3 are the provisions you were just referring to?
that's correct.
Tell me just a little bit of your observation. How long have you known Ellen Murdaugh? Let me ask you that.
I've known Alec since I was in high school, so roughly 40 years,
And how long have you worked with him, or did you work with him?
about 23, 24 years, since 1999.
And did he have a lucrative practice in your observation?
Yes, he did well.
Was he sometimes getting as much as 7 figures in the end of the year?
He has.
Are you familiar with what's been called the boat case?
Yes.
And tell me what your understanding of the boat case is, just generally. What was that?
Generally speaking, it was an accident that several children got in one evening where it was in Paul's, or the Murdaugh's boat. Paul was accused as the driver, and there were a lot of civil suits and some criminal proceedings going on related to that crime.
And following the boat case, is it your understanding that Paul Murdaugh was charged?
Yes,
Is it your understanding that Alec Murdaugh was civilly sued?
yes,
And there was ongoing civil litigation at the time Paul and Maggie were murdered?
that's correct.
After the boat case happened, did you and Alec ever have any discussions about structuring fees?
We did in late May of 2020, 2021. Right about the end of the month, we had some discussions about Hirschberger. A disbursement came through that he had tried to send his fees to a structured settlement. And the conversation was that he had done it improperly, because to structure fees properly, it has to be part of the release. It has to go straight from the insurance company, straight to the structured annuity place. And we would need to be told about it in our firm so we could account for it in our 7.5%. But in this particular case, Alec had sent the money directly to Forge. We discussed the fact that it would not be any tax benefit to him, and at that point in time, he said he was not really worried about the tax benefit of it. And he said he was trying to put some money in Maggie's name due to the boat wreck, and that he was trying to figure out if he was going to structure fees for the future.
Okay. Did he say he was trying to do a favor for anyone too?
He did say he was friends with Michael Gunn, and who is the owner of, or one of the operators of Forge, and that he was going to try to put up to about $250,000 into a structure as a favor for Michael Gunn.
All right, when you say Forge, what are you talking about?
So Forge is a company that does structured annuities.
Do you have the full name real quick?
It's Forge Consulting.
All right, let's call it Forge Consulting.
Okay, Forge
Trying to do that.
Consulting.
All right, tell
Yeah.
me about Forge Consulting and what they are.
They're a company that will do structured annuities for clients. They'll do structured fees for attorneys. They do some wealth management. They do minor pool trust. They have several different things that they do. I think they've branched out into insurance coverage now. They provide a lot of financial tools.
Now, when you say that you had a conversation with him about him supposedly structuring fees, how did this come to your attention?
It came to my attention over the fact that a disbursement, one of my secretaries, or my assistant brought to me, that had been brought to her attention by Alec's secretary or paralegal Annette Griswold, and came and asked me if this was proper, and then came to me after the fact, and that's when I went in conversations with Alec about this.
Okay. And so had the money already been paid?
Yes,
And you went to Alec and you asked, what's this about?
yes.
And he said, I'm doing what?
I'm trying to defer and put money into Maggie's name and structure some fees.
Did he tell you where that money had gone? What was your belief where that money had gone after you talked to Alec?
My belief was it had gone to Forge Consulting.
The real entity, Forge
Yes.
Consulting.
Yes.
All right. I'm going to show you, just real quick, what's been marked for purposes of this hearing is States 311, and see if you recognize that series. I think there's 4 documents in there.
Yes, these are the Hirschberger settlement documents, which is the case that we're talking about, the fee that he sent as a structure.
Okay? And are there 1 or 2 in there ultimately?
There are ultimately 2. There's one that's structured to look like fee, and then the other one was structured to look like it was client's money that was being sent on the client's behalf.
Which one were you aware of at the time?
I was aware of the fee one for the $83,333.33.
All right. At the time, did you think that any money had been misappropriated or stolen, or did you just think Alec was trying to sort of divert some money because of the boat case, but not necessarily anything misappropriated at that
Right,
time?
we were not thinking about him misappropriating funds or stealing any client funds. What we were concerned about was he was trying to either defer income by leaving it in somebody's trust, or either trying to put some money into Maggie's name to avoid things for the boat accident.
And when you say we were concerned, who's concerned?
Myself and some of the partners.
Why are y'all concerned about him potentially trying to put money in a structure or in Maggie's name because of the boat case?
Well, because that would be wrong, and we did not want any part of that.
Let me put this up on the screen real quick. All right. Do you recognize this document right here?
Excuse me. Yes, that's the document that is in question with the $83,333.33 fee sent to Forge.
All right. And right there, tell me what this disbursement sheet is very quickly. Explain that to the court.
So this is where the client recovered $250,000. You can see it came from 3 different insurers, and we would take a portion of our fee. Generally, this looks like a third, and our expenses of $9,300. The Sedgwick claims would have been a lien that we were paying off, and then the $140,678.55 would have been the money dispersed between the beneficiaries of that estate.
And what is this line right here?
That would represent the fee.
All right. At this point in time, had you actually seen the check that was made out for those fees?
I don't recall if I actually looked at it at that point in time.
And normally fees, where would they go?
Normally, if fees would come to us and we would deposit into our income account, what we call our income account.
Okay. So fees come in from somebody who pays the settlement, where do they go initially?
To-
What account do they go in?
To the income account, the PMPD operating income account.
Okay. Fees go in there?
Yes.
All right. When a settlement comes in, where does it go?
It goes into a client trust account for the benefit of the client,
And then the portion of that is allocated for fees, it goes from the trust account to where?
to the income account.
Okay. It usually doesn't go out to Ford's Consulting or anything like
No.
that? All right. After you had that conversation at Alec, did you follow up any more on the matter?
We had a couple of conversations about it in relation to some other, when we were having some other conversations, but we didn't really readdress this again until late September, late August, early September.
Did you kind of put it on the back burner?
I did. I was, at that point, it had been done, and I was trying to figure out how we were going to account for it on our books, and just kind of had it out there as a reminder to try to see, to put in my mind later to see if anything else had been done like that, or to see if he was going to try to do that again.
After that particular event, you said that was in late May sometime?
You're right.
Did another matter come to your attention about disbursements as it related to Alec Murdaugh's practice in his business?
It did.
And tell me what that was, please.
So on, this was a case called the Ferris versus Mack truck case. And on a Monday, I believe it was May 24th, Annette Griswold called me and said that she had something she needed to discuss with me. I was out of the office that day in our Waldoboro office, but when I returned, we met. And when she showed me, what had happened was we received a check for our client expenses. So this case was actually dispersed by the associated attorney, which was Chris Wilson. So he sent us a check for the money that we had forwarded as client expenses, but we did not receive a fee check. And that is itself is odd generally.
And why is that odd? Why did Annette call you? Because y'all had received a fee check from Alec's best friend, Chris Wilson, but not the, the expense check, but not the fee check.
Right, most of the time we receive them together. Well, Annette, when she did not receive them together, called my assistant Nicole to make sure we had not already received the fee, verified that we had not already received the fee, and at that point, Annette had some conversations with Vicki Lyman in Chris's office. And Vicki informed Chris that their bosses had already got the fee when the settlement was signed, which had happened in March, and this was May.
And Vicki informed Chris or Vicki informed Annette?
Vicki informed Annette of that.
All right. So why is that a concern to you that now you're hearing the fee's already been paid?
Because now we know we don't have the check, we've never received it, so either he's got a fee, either he's got a check he hasn't turned in to us that is properly payable to PMPD, or he's received a check payable to him.
All right. And when you were considering the possibility that he perhaps received a check payable to him, aside from that being stealing, as you had earlier testified to it, what's your concern then?
Saying that he's trying to hide money from the vote rack.
Not money from both. Okay, correct. All right, stand by for me. All right, I'm going to show you what's been marked as, for the purposes of this hearing, as Exhibit 312, and see if you recognize this document.
Yes, this is the expense check that we received in the Ferris matter
Okay?
from
And
Wilson Law Group.
just quick flip through it and just tell me generally what's in that packet.
The rest of the packet is our deposit, which is an internal record, our client cost report, which matches that expense check. Then the rest of it, the second, what I'm looking at right now is a check made payable to Richard Alexander Murdaugh Esquire for $192,000, and it references Ferris fees.
Okay, keep
That's-
going.
Next page is the deposit, where it says Bank of America deposit only, and it looks like ACH. That looks like, it actually looks to me like Alex initials, and then it says Bank of America.
Is there a series of emails after that?
Series of emails starts with Vicki Lyman informing Annette Griswold about the fact that their bosses had received the fee back when the disbursement was signed.
All right, let me put those emails up on the screen. I believe there's no objection versus this hearing. All right. So this is email, and Annette Griswold, explain to the judge who Annette Griswold is, please.
Annette Griswold is one of Alex's primary paralegals.
Okay. And right here, this is an email that was ultimately sent to you as part of bringing this to your attention?
Yes.
All right, and what is she asking right there?
She said, why just expenses and no fee?
All right. All right, and what was the response there?
Dear friend, it is only cost because your boss and mine and Liz's got their fees once they were signed.
Okay. So Annette's informing you that Chris Wilson's office says they already got the fees.
Correct.
All right. All right. After that, did you have a conversation with Annette what to do?
I did. I actually talked with Lee Cope. We went to Lee. Sometimes a lot of the partners are not in the office, and Lee Cope was the one who was in the office. So I went to talk to Lee about what we should do. And of course, Annette was worried about getting, ramifications if she was wrong and didn't want to be in trouble. So Lee and I decided to take it over from there. And the course of action that we decided upon was that I would send an email to Annette requesting the disbursement, the supporting documents, and the general ledger printout from Chris Wilson's office, which is what we keep in our office.
All right. And if we go right here, is that the email you're speaking of right there?
That is
All right. What's the date on that?
May 27th.
All right. And so then what happens to that email from there if we look over to the next page?
So apparently Vicki in Chris Wilson's office was on vacation, so on June 2nd, Annette clarifies with Vicki what exactly we were looking for. And again, she asked for the full disbursement paperwork, including the disbursement sheets, expenses, supporting docs, and ledger.
All right. And you're included on that email?
I am CC'd, yes.
Okay. All right. Did y'all ultimately get a response on that?
Vicki responded that she would have to send that email to Chris because she did not have privy to that information. So that was on the 2nd. The next day, Alec came into my office early and asked me why I needed that information and assured me that the money was in Chris Wilson's account and that they could get it anytime.
Okay. And did y'all discuss anything further when you had that conversation?
Just that we needed to get it, or I needed proof that it was there, that it was necessary to get it. At that point, I didn't indicate to him that I thought it was missing. I was just asking for the documentation.
And that was on what day?
It was sometime in between June 2nd and June 7th.
Okay. All right. On June 7th, did the issue come back to a head?
The issue did come back to heads.
Just clear, this is June 7th, 2021.
Yes.
And how much were these fees supposed to be, did you know?
$792,000 in total.
And to this point, the firm had not received those fees, is that correct?
That's correct.
And Chris Wilson's office is saying initially, we already dispersed them.
Yes. And Chris Wilson's not saying anything to me.
Was, to your knowledge, was an inquiry made to Chris Wilson at that time?
Lee Cope, we had not inquired Chris Wilson other than requesting this information at this point in time.
All right. So tell me about June 7th. How does that go?
So on June 7th, I was going to make another run at finding out from Alec if we had their information. I went upstairs to his office is on the 2nd floor, and he was leaning on a file cabinet outside of his office. And he turned and looked at me when I came up and said, "What do you need now?" And gave me a very dirty look, not a look that I'd ever received from Alec, from just kind of frustrated with me look, which made me go, oh, you want to know, let's go in your office. So we went in the office and closed the door, and at that point, I told him that I had reason to believe that he had received the funds himself and that I needed proof that he had not.
Received those fees himself,
Yes,
and I needed proof that they're not.
yes.
What did he tell you?
He told me again, that he assured me that the money was there and that he could get it. And at that point, I said, I'm just trying to do my job, and if I don't get this paperwork and verify that with these questions, I'm not doing my job. He actually acted like he respected that, and again said that that money was there, and that he, again, was trying to decide what he was going to be doing with it.
And did y'all get to conclude that conversation, or just something interrupted?
We did not. He took a phone call in the middle of that conversation. That phone call was about his father who was in the hospital, that he was going to be terminal, and that there was nothing else they'd be able to do for his father. So that changed the mood of the conversation. We quit talking about business, and I immediately asked about him and his family and his dad, and, we got talking as friends at that point, concern over the family. And after that, I shortly left, so it briefed and cut down the conversation.
All right, you'd come in there asking for proof where that money was, because you had reason to believe he took it, and then the conversation ultimately got short by the call about his father.
Yes,
Did you have a conversation later in the day with Alec?
I did. Around 4 o'clock, my phone rang, and I remember that because I had been under the impression Alec was going to leave and go to the hospital or leave to deal with his father. And around 4 o'clock, my office extension rang, and at that point, he was asking me for some information on his 401k balances because he stated he was working on some financials for the hearing on the boat accident that was later in the week.
There was a hearing later in the week, and he was
Yes.
working on financials for the boat accident.
Correct.
Did that strike you as odd?
That he called and asked me? No, he had asked me before, so, and I would be the one to give him the 401k, so it didn't surprise me that he's calling to ask me about that. But I was surprised that he was in the building working on it.
And why was that?
I just thought he was leaving to deal with his father.
Because that interrupted the prior conversation.
That's right.
Was that the last conversation you had with him?
It is.
When did you find out about the murders?
I initially found out through the rumor mill around 10:30 or 11 o'clock the evening of them, but I did not get confirmation until I received a text from the partner roughly 2:30 or 3 o'clock in the morning.
Were you shocked by that?
Yes,
Scared?
yes,
Worried?
yes.
Worried for Alec?
Worried for everybody, yes, especially Ellie.
In the wake of the murders, do you know if the hearing that was later that week got canceled?
It did get canceled.
That was a hearing in the boat case where he's personally a defendant?
That's my understanding, yes.
In the wake of the boat case, did you and the partners have a discussion about what to do about getting to the bottom of these Ferris fees?
We did not the week of the murders because pretty much our office shut down the week of the murders, and then his father also passing away. But when we got back around to it, Lee and Mark Ball and I were the ones doing the discussion. Lee decided that he would call Chris Wilson himself directly and try to get the information, and Lee took over from there.
In the wake of the murders, did anyone want to bring that up to Alec again?
No, nobody wanted, Alec was distraught and upset and not in the office much, and nobody wanted to harass him about nothing that we thought was really missing. We had several months till the end of the year to clear it up, so we were not going to harass him at that point in time. But
So that part just got stopped in its tracks, is that true?
yes, Lee took over calling Chris Wilson and trying to pursue it.
All right, and when was that? You said in July sometime?
Yes, probably early July.
All right, and what was the result of that?
Lee said, and you could speak to him more clearly, but Lee said Chris Wilson got off the phone pretty quick with him, which was surprising because apparently Chris Wilson has the gift of gab. But again, Chris assured Lee that it was there.
All right, ultimately, did y'all get an email about this particular issue?
We did. Ultimately, on July 19th, there was an email from Chris to Alec stating that the money was in Chris Wilson's trust and would have been available anytime that we requested it. That email was forwarded to Lee Cope and myself
From whom?
from Alec.
And what, is that the email up on the screen that you're talking about right now?
It is.
All right, and we see 600,000 for Andrew Ferris and 192 for Denise. Explain that breakdown, if you would, please.
So there's two parties in this case, and apparently there was two recoveries, and each of them would have had a fee dependent upon their recovery. So to me, this looks like Andrew's portion, the fee for his settlement was the 600,000, and Denise's was 192,000.
At this point in time, had the firm received this $792,000?
No.
Did this email, though, sort of end the inquiry, at least for the present moment?
Yes.
All right, well, let's move the story forward again. Did this matter ever come to your attention again at a later time?
Yes.
All right, and tell me when that came to your attention.
That would have been in September, after we found some other misappropriations, and we had confronted Alec, and he had resigned. We ended up having more conversations with Chris Wilson right after that, and Chris admitted that he did not have all the money.
Well, let me back it up. Before we get to there, I'm talking about as far as it relates to Alec. Did this particular issue with trying to get the Ferris fees come to your attention? And let me take you to early September of 2021.
No, not that I recall.
Okay. In early September 2021, did the Hirschberger matter that you mentioned earlier, did that come back to your attention?
That came back to my attention. I started pursuing that and decided I was going to go through and look and make sure that he had not tried to already defer something else that we had missed. And at that point, I decided to print a ledger printout of our system of payments to Forge. And as I did that, I started printing all the documents that would relate to those disbursements, the disbursement statements and the canceled checks. And as I started printing the canceled checks off, I could see Bank of America on the back and Alec Murdaugh's signature. And everyone that came out was just put it a little bit more in the grave for me. That's when I found that out. I had William Barnes come over, who was a partner who was in there in the office that day, and had him look at them. He also believed that they were Alec's signatures on the back of these checks.
All right, and just real quick, these are checks coming from the client trust account,
Yes,
and they're made out to what?
Forge.
But what's unusual to you that's causing you to have that feeling that you just described?
The endorsement and the Bank of America on the back, and the fact that it looked like Alec's signature.
Okay, all right. And so you talked to William Barnes, is that right?
Yes,
And did you talk to other partners about what you were finding?
we did. William and I then called Mark Ball, who had been aware of this situation the whole time. Mark Ball was the treasurer, so he came back into the office. We showed him the signatures. He agreed with us, and he also recognized one of the disbursements as a case that could not have possibly been dispersed yet because it was held up waiting some court orders for a workers' comp lien. We also talked to Lee Cope that night about it, and we came to the plan for Lee to call Michael Gunn with Forge and see if they had banked at Bank of America. And Michael Gunn confirmed that they had not banked at Bank of America in a number of years.
Did y'all send them a list of clients, the ones that you were pulling off of your system that had payments to Forge at Bank of America?
We did. We gave him a few names that evening, not the complete list. We gave him a few names that we had, and he verified that Michael Gunn verified to Lee Cope that those were not any structures or any annuities, and they didn't have records of them.
All right, around this time, did Annette bring you anything, and that this is all going on?
Yes, so this is completely independent and coincidental. Annette, the same afternoon of September 2nd, was in his office trying to look for something, and when she moved to file, a check fell out. When the check fell out, she looked down, and it was Chris Wilson, and it was the $225,000 check payable to Richard Alexander Murdaugh that we'd already found.
And I'm going to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 313 states for purposes of this hearing, you recognize that?
That's the check.
This is the actual check that was found, is that right?
That's correct.
All right, hold on for me real quick. Got an endorsement on the back. Let me ask you this, you've worked with Alec Murdaugh for how long?
23 years roughly.
During that time, did you become familiar with his handwriting?
Yes,
Can you recognize it when you see it?
yes,
Looking at the handwriting, the endorsement on the back of that document, do you recognize it?
that's his signature and
This is
handwriting.
writing?
What is, copies of these various exhibits for the court?
Yes, sir. And Your Honor, if you'll just give me 1 second, I'll hand the exhibits we're talking about up to the court as well. But up on the screen, is this the check?
Yes. Yes,
And then on the back, whose writing is that?
Alex.
Once you started printing out all those forged ones that had Alec's writing on it in Bank of America, and you contacted Forge, did you ask them whether or not they ever banked, the real Forge, if they ever banked at Bank of America?
Lee Cope had that conversation, and Michael Gunn verified that they had not banked there in a number of years, more than 10 years.
And they didn't have any active structures on any of the clients that y'all had given them?
That's correct.
As a result of that, what did the leadership at the firm do next?
We convened a meeting on the morning of Friday, September 3rd at Lee Cope's house with the majority of the partners and myself present. We discussed what we had found and showed everybody the documentation that we had recovered. And then the choice was made, Randy was not present initially. The choice was made to bring Randy in and show him what we had found.
And after Randy was brought in and showed what was found, what happened next?
Randy immediately conceded that we needed to talk to Alec, that it looked like he had stolen. And Danny and Randy got together and met with Alec outside of the office.
Okay. And did they confront him with this information?
They did, and it is my understanding that Alec admitted it and that it was determined he would resign.
Okay. Did he ask for a leave of absence to your?
I think he tried to do a few other things before resigning, but we made him resign.
After the decision was made to resign, was it announced right away, or was there any statement put out or anything like that right away?
It was not announced right away because the decision was made, Johnny Parker was getting married the next day, and it was late on a Friday, and that we were going to kind of hold off until the first of the week. We were going to contact some ethics attorneys and see what we needed to do and announce it the first of the week.
So we're in the weekend, September 3rd, September 4th, something like that?
Yes,
Is that Labor Day weekend?
yes.
What's the next thing you recall hearing about Alec?
The next thing I heard about Alec was, I was actually with my family on the sandbar, and the next thing I heard was Suzanne Peoples with the EMS came down and told me that Alec had been shot in the head and was being flown out to Savannah.
Was that on the side of the road at Old Salcahatchee?
That's correct.
What's the first thing you thought when you heard he had been shot?
You know, nobody knew what to think. A lot of thoughts went through, but fear went through. Was this retaliation? Was he involved in something bigger? that was going to get more of us in trouble and just fear.
All right. As the months went on after that, did y'all continue to review your records looking for additional misappropriations?
We did. We immediately decided, once we found this out on September 2nd and had the confrontation on the 3rd, we immediately started doing a dig into our books and proactively going to look for anything. And anything that we found, we turned over to law enforcement. We also had a forensic audit from an outside firm come in and provided information from them. So this took most of September, gathering all this information and going through all of our stuff to figure out what else we had missed or what else had occurred.
You've already described the checks to the Forge account at Bank of America, which was a fake Forge account, is that correct?
That's right.
Was there another manner in which Alec Murdaugh misappropriated money that you uncovered in your review of the firm's records as CFO?
Yes, we've also found out some payments made through Palmetto State Bank.
Okay, and generally explain how those were working.
So those were working on, some of those Russell Lafitte was the conservator on, and funds were directed to Palmetto State Bank as if they were going to be held for the beneficiary. And those checks were later converted into personal use for Alec.
All right.
And incidentally, the week after we, of the roadside shooting, when we were going through stuff in Alec's office, we actually found Forge, R. Alexander Murdaugh, doing business at Forge bank statements in his office.
Okay, so you found the Bank of America bank statements?
Yes.
And the title on those bank statements was what?
R. Alexander Murdaugh, doing business as Forge.
Okay. I'm gonna get a document marked, if I could, real quick. The client trust account checks, what color are they?
Green,
All right, and the operating checks, are they a different color?
blue.
Your Honor, 314 for this hearing, this will be the spreadsheet that's in one of the folders in the packet I just gave you. It starts at the top, the check date 12/26/18. And I'm going to show you what's been marked as states 314 for this hearing and see if you recognize that document.
Yes, this is a spreadsheet that we've developed of the money and the clients that had money stolen using the Forge payment method.
All right, and by the forged payment method, you mean what?
Basically, checks payable to Forge that looked like they were going to be for a structured annuity on the behalf of the client.
All right, and again, for the purposes of this hearing, in preparing that chart, you've been keeping a chart and keeping these records, is that correct?
That's right.
Is this all the misappropriations, or is this focused just on some for purposes of a particular category?
This is just for purposes of this particular category.
And what category is that again?
Forge.
All right. All right, I'm going to put this up on the screen. And just real quick, if you could just go across and tell me what the various categories represent, please.
Excuse me. The categories, if you see the column of category, Forge payment, those would be where checks were actually written to Forge as if those were the beneficiary's proceeds that were being sent for a structured annuity.
Okay.
The next line where it says Barrett Boulware took insurance proceeds, this is actually a check that was payable to Barrett Boulware from Southern Fidelity Insurance. And Alec actually endorsed that check. He had power of attorney on that file. He actually endorsed that check, and later we were able to trace it into his personal accounts.
All right.
If you keep going down, the majority of these are Forge payment, If you get to Dion Martin, the first line says
Just
fake.
real quick, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Just going across though, we've got the client, we've got the civil action number, we've got the category that you were just describing, we got the date the trust was funded, and then we have the amount. Is that correct?
That's right.
And the date the trust was funded, what does that category refer to?
That refers to when we found out and did the deep dive into exactly what had happened on each file and deposited the money back immediately into our client trust. So that's, the firm actually, as we found these, put money in client trust. We then met with all the clients, reestablished what the correct disbursements should have been, and returned all funds to the clients.
So the firm had to pay the money back that you've determined in each one of these cases that Alec Murdaugh misappropriated through the fake forge on this list.
We did.
What's the total amount on this sheet?
$2,841,512.55.
Right. And again, does this represent everything or just a particular category?
Just a particular category.
Just real quick, I see that says 12911 for Thomas Moore. Is that supposed to be 21?
Yes.
Okay.
And that would be the date and the check number of the check that was taken.
I'm going to hand Exhibit 314 up to you. And if you could correct that with my pen here, and then just put your initials next to it, please. Going back to Exhibit 314, if we look at all the check dates on here, we have the earliest one being about August of 2015, is that correct?
That's right.
And then it continues all the way up to early 2021, is that correct?
That's correct. Along with your spreadsheet that was just marked, have you also prepared some supporting documentation for each one of those transactions of misappropriation that you've identified? Yes, we have.
And these are from the records and your investigation into the records at the firm?
That's correct.
And each one of these, has the firm had to make the clients whole because of the defendant's misappropriation?
We did.
All right, I'm going to show you what's been marked as 315, and this is particular case is Elise Mallory. And just as an example, and see if you recognize that document.
Indeed, this first document is the disbursement which would have been drafted at the end of the case that states the recovery, expenses, fees, and payments to clients. Next, we have, this one actually had a payment to forge, so I have a copy of that canceled check. And then the third and fourth pages are where we did our correcting disbursements with footnotes about what had happened and explained everything to our clients when we reimbursed them.
Okay. Let's put that up on the screen real quick. And are there similar documents, supporting documents for each one of these transactions that's on your spreadsheet?
There is.
All right. So this is a disbursement sheet, is that right?
That's correct.
And I didn't ask you, but very quickly, tell me what a disbursement sheet is and how they're supposed to work.
So disbursement just shows conclusion phase once the recovery. It will show the recovery amount, list out the fees that were sent to the attorneys,
be, isn't it?
But I don't, Alex stole
Last bit of it.
every bit.
I didn't get $1. That's similar
It's
to,
exactly like the rest.
documentation packet up there. I'm happy with the witness. If the point made, or if you would like me to go to those. I have to keep going.
That's yours.
One moment, Your Honor.
Thing, Ms. Seconder?
On the supporting documentation, we can kind of walk through. Packet has one on there, and then the very minimum, and again, appropriation, have a few supporting the sheet. And that's generally what each packet has. Correct, Ms. Sessions?
That's correct.
I can go through those quick category. Me going back to 2009. Something like that. All right. So we're going to, and we're going to go.
Yes,
All right, and down at the bottom, do you recognize the signature where it says attorney?
that's Alex's signature.
All right, and would typically the attorneys meet with the clients and get them to sign these disbursement sheets before any disbursements were made?
Typically, we did the checks on the attorney's signature, and then the attorney met with the client and had them signed at the same time they distributed and discussed the disbursement.
Gotcha. All right, and then right here on this particular recovery amount, how much?
$247,500.
All right, and then the firm gets paid, is that?
Again, that looks like a reduced fee of $22,000.
And what happens to the rest of the money?
The 225,073.46 went to a fake forge account that was for Alex's benefit.
All right, and is that the check right there?
That is,
Whose signature is that right there?
that's Alex.
All right, and that's 225 and change, and then you have the corrected disbursement sheet, is that correct?
That's correct.
And this is where the firm had to make good on Alex's misappropriation.
That's correct.
All right, let's move to the next one. This would be for Mr. Barrett, using the first name, is that correct?
That's right, Barrett Bolware.
All right, and just using the first name. We have this first one is the 75,193, is that right?
That is the check I discussed earlier that was payable to Barrett that Alec endorsed directly and deposited into his account.
All right, and I'm on exhibit 318. We're going to the third page, but is this that check right here that was made out to Mr. Bulware?
That is, and that was actually found as we went through his desk after September 3rd.
All right, and you recognize that writing right there? I can zoom in if you need to.
That's Alec's writing.
All right, and this is the deposit slip went along with it?
Yes,
And what's the name right there?
Alec Murdaugh.
All right, going to the next one on the list, we have this one, and the amount is $279,850.65, is that right?
That's correct.
All right, and we're still in exhibit 318. And this is the disbursement sheet, the original disbursement sheet right there,
That's correct.
whose signature is down at the bottom.
That's Alec Murdaugh's.
And what does that say right there?
$279,000, $850.65.
that
Payable
good?
to Forge.
Fake forge or real forge?
Fake.
All right, and then what is that right there?
That's the check payable to Forge showing Alec signing it and endorsement on the back.
Okay. All right, let's move on to the next one. We have, this is Hirschberger. We already did that one, correct?
That's correct.
Well, yeah, we already did that one. All right, let's go on, and we did the next two. Those were those two fees that Alec told you he was structuring?
That's right.
All right, or at least this one was, correct?
That's right.
All right, let's go on to Ms. Gary. This is States 319. This is the disbursement sheet right here,
That is the initial disbursement sheet.
okay? And what is that right there?
Excuse me, that is not the initial, that's the second one. So there's a Forge structure right there of 112.5, a payment of the personal rep and the amount divvied between the beneficiaries. That Forge structure should have been paid to the beneficiaries, and again, it was paid to the fake Forge account.
All right,
You
look-
see the check signed by Alec and endorsed by Alec.
all right, so that's 112.5 right there, correct?
That's right.
And then you have the corrected disbursement where y'all had to make right to the clients.
That's correct.
All right. Moving on to the next one, we have Mr., and I'm gonna use their first names, use that for me if you can, please. All right, Mr. Christopher? All right, and we have you have this disbursement right here, is that correct?
That's right.
And whose signature is that right there?
Alec Murdaugh's,
And we got how much?
$750,000.
Going to what?
Fake Forge,
The fake forge, is that correct?
that's right,
And then we have the check,
that we do.
and who's, do you recognize that on the back?
That is Alec Murdaugh's,
Okay, and this is $750,000?
that's correct.
All right, and then we have another disbursement sheet where y'all had to correct it and make it right to the client?
That's correct.
Y'all had to pay back $750,000
We did,
that Alex spent?
We
Client
did.
money?
we did, he stole it.
All right, let's go to the next one. Dion Martin, we have 3 for Mr. Martin, is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, let's look at that. We have,
So you have a little new category here. You see it above where it says structured annuity directly to Michael Gunn for $500,000, and then it's offset by the proceeds structured annuity below. This would represent like there was an annuity associated with that case that had been properly structured and sent, and that resulted in there being a $200,000 fee taken on that $500,000 that should not have been taken from the client.
so just a sleight of hand with paperwork, and Ella created a phantom real $200,000 in fees from thin air.
That's right.
All right, but that's not the end of this one, is it?
No.
Okay. All right, right here on the second page, we have a disbursement to Forge, is that correct?
That's right.
And is that real Forge or fake Forge?
That's the fake Forge.
How much is that one?
$338,000, $56.14.
Okay. Now, we already talked about on this list, we talked about the fake fee of 200,000 that you just mentioned.
That's right.
And we did the 338,056.
That's right.
14, okay, let's keep going. And what's that?
That's the check for the $338,000 that's payable to the Fake Forge and endorsed by Alec.
All right, and then what is this disbursement sheet?
This one is showing a structured payment of $45,000, and this one incidentally had a quote attached to it and is signed by the client. And that also went to the Fake Forge account and his personal account. This is a copy of the quote from Forge.
But no forged structure was ever
No,
materialized?
none was done. We verified none was ever done.
All right, and what is that $45,000 check there?
This is the $45,000 check to the Fake Forge deposited by Alec.
And is this the disbursement sheet where y'all had to correct it and make it right to the client?
Yes.
All right, moving on to the next one. We have Elise Mallory, and that's the one I showed you at the beginning. It is an example. Is that
That's right.
All right, so we've done that one, and that was 183,528, where he took every last dime of it. Is that
That's
correct?
right.
Yep. All right, the last one I talked about was 321. The one before that was 320, and the one before that was 319. We are now on 322. Let me turn the page. And we have Mr. Jamian, is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, and right here, we've got a disbursement sheet, is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, and we have a forge of $90,000, all
That's correct.
right, and is that real forge or fake forge?
Fake Forge.
Okay, and what is this right here, sideways?
That is the check payable to Forge, the Fake Forge, and the endorsement on the back of the check.
All right. All right, and then we have an expense disbursement right there of 5541.17, is that correct?
That's correct.
And is that another amount that y'all had identified?
We identified later that that was an incorrect charge to a client file, so we reimbursed that as well.
Okay, and is this that page right here?
Yes.
And what did Alec bill to the client that y'all determined was improper?
Some airfare
To where?
on a private flight. I can't recall, but I believe that one might have been down to the Keys.
Did y'all have to pay that money back too in this corrected disbursement?
We did.
That was exhibit 322. We got 333, Mr. Johnny, $95,000, is that right?
That's correct.
All right, on the first page, we have the disbursement sheet, and we have a forge line right here for $95,000.
That's correct.
Did that go to the real forge or the fake forge?
Fake Forge.
Okay, we have a copy of the check right there, is that correct?
That's a copy of the check and the endorsement, and a copy of the correcting disbursement.
Y'all had to make that right to the client.
We did.
Moving on to 324, Mr. Jordan, we got a disbursement to Forge, is that right?
That's right, for $85,000, along with the fake check and the endorsement on the check.
Okay. And then the corrected disbursement, correct?
You missed the one for $65,000. There was two in that one.
Yep, there it is right there.
That's right. And then the correcting.
All right. So we had an 85 and a 65,000 for that one, correct?
Correct.
Exhibit 325, this is now Mr. Manuel, and we have a $70,000 forge, is that correct?
That's correct.
Fake forge?
Fake Forge.
All right. And what's that right there?
The check payable to Forge, the Fake Forge, and the endorsement. And this is the correcting disbursement where we paid the client back that $70,000.
Go on to the next one, we got Miss Mary, and we got a settlement proceeds to Forge of 19.5 right there, is that correct?
That's correct.
And this is Exhibit 326, and did that go to real Forge or fake
The
Forge?
Fake Forge.
All right, and what is that right there?
Copies of the check, the Fake Forge, and the endorsement on the back by Alec.
All right, and then the corrected disbursement having to pay the money back
Correct.
by the firm? All right. Going on to Mr. Randy. Right here, we've got a disbursement of $9,569.30 on Exhibit 327.
Correct?
All right, next page, we have what?
The copy of the check payable to the fake forge and the endorsement by Alec on the back of it.
All right, and then the correction disbursement.
Correct?
All right, and the last one for this set is Exhibit 328, and we have Thomas Moore, is that correct?
That's correct.
And whose signature is that right there?
That is Alex.
And the amount to forge of $125,000, is that
Yes.
right?
Incidentally, that's a forged signature for the client. The client confirmed that when we met with them.
Do you recognize that handwriting
It appears to me to be Alex printing.
on the disbursement sheet?
Yeah,
All right, and then we have the fake check right there,
that's correct.
or the fake forward check, and then that's all on that one for right now, is that
That
correct?
was partial correction. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Were things like this going on in a lot of cases that Alec had? Fair amount?
Well, we found them in these several cases, and in the scope of all cases, not so much. I mean, we have a ton of volume, so this doesn't represent a large proportion of those, but this was common with them.
And that's my point, is
Yes.
that there's a large volume,
Yes.
and these are sprinkled throughout over years and years and years.
Break it out over a decade or better.
Whenever there was an opportunity, it happened.
Yes.
All right. I'm gonna show you, let me get a couple more documents, Mark.
I'll stand for a moment. We'll show you what's been marked as Exhibit 329 here to this proceeding, and see if you recognize that.
I do. This is a spreadsheet of the payments that were made to Palmetto State Bank and misappropriated through that method.
All right, you testified earlier that the fake forge account, the Richard Alexander Murdaugh DBA forge, started around 2015, is that right?
That's correct.
But you just uncovered a different mechanism whereby Alec Murdaugh misappropriated money from clients prior to that, is that correct?
That's correct. Most of these took place in 2011 and 2012.
Okay, and did Alec have some particularly big cases in those years?
He did.
And what were those cases?
So he had Arthur Badger, which was against a UPS truck in Allendale where his wife was killed, and I believe a couple children hurt. There were several beneficiaries in that case. In that same wreck, well, then they had another one with Hakeem Pickney, who in that same wreck had a cousin in the car named Natasha Thomas.
Okay, let's talk about the Badger case. What was the total settlement in that particular case?
In the Badger case, the total that was apportioned to Arthur Badger was $3.1 million. There was also a companion case, Donna Badger, with a good bit apportioned to it as well. I can't recall the number right here, right off the top of my head.
All right, but just for Arthur Badger, who was just one of the clients that Alec had, correct?
Right.
Just for Arthur Badger, what was the attorney fee that he received in that settlement?
He received $1,240,000.
The firm did.
The firm
But
did.
that would be ultimately on his books at the end of the year.
It would be credited to him.
$1,260,000, is that right?
$1,240,000.
Is that all the money that Alec received from that particular case when y'all did your review?
That is not.
What else did Alec take?
$1,325,000.
Another $1.325 million, is that right?
That's right.
And how did he go about doing that?
Checks were payable to Palmetto State Bank that were then converted into personal items, payments for bank loans, payments for loans from a conservator account, payments to Johnny Parker, I believe it was, one to his father for paying back personal loans that they had given him.
Okay. And so we've got now what's been marked as Exhibit 329 up on the screen. I'll let the sirens go by. Guess I'll just talk over them. All right, we've got on this one at the top, we have Mr. Arthur Badger, is that right?
That's right.
And we have the date, and we have the amount, which is how much?
$1,360,000, and that is because we returned the PR fee in that case as well, because the PR failed to do their job properly.
Okay. Now I'm going to show you what's been marked for this hearing is 330, and is this the disbursement sheet?
Yes, sir.
And down here, we have Palmetto State Bank payment to fund structure per client request, is that right?
That's right.
And that's the 1.325 million?
That's correct.
And did that go to the client?
No.
I see there's an email right here. Who is that from and to, and what's the date on that? You need me to bring it to you?
So this email is from Russell to Alec. Doesn't look right. There was an email that came from Alec to Russell asking if we could recut the checks in a certain way. Then Russell independently sent an email to Alec, which was forwarded to me and my accounting staff, asking if we could recut the $1.3 million check into 4 different checks.
And did y'all do that?
We did.
Have any reason at all to mistrust what was going on at that time?
No.
So really,
And ultimately, those got broken down into all these payments. This is the payments and how these checks were written and what benefit they went to.
and they were made out to what entity?
Palmetto State Bank.
And then after they were made out to Palmetto State Bank, what happened to them?
They got converted to personal usage for Alec Murdaugh's benefit.
quick, I see the spreadsheet says July 2005. I'm going to point you to this disbursement, though. What's the date on that disbursement?
November 2012.
So is that an error that needs to be corrected?
I'm sure that that's an error that needs to be corrected.
I'm going to bring your spreadsheet. Let's do that real quick. Give me a pen and, November 11th, 2012. All right, let's talk about another case. I'm looking now at Exhibit 332, and we go back to your spreadsheet, and we have Natasha Thomas. Do you recognize that?
I do.
All right, and what was the amount on that particular one?
There were two payments. One was for $325,000 even. The other one was $25,245.08.
All right, and looking at Exhibit 332, we have down here at the bottom, we have payment, and it says what entity right there
Palmetto State Bank?
for 325.
Yes.
So was a check cut from the trust account for 325?
Yes,
And is that it right there?
that is it.
And did that money go to the client?
No, that money went for Alec's benefit.
All right. Did y'all have to pay that back and make that right for his
We did pay that
misappropriation?
back.
All right.
What you're seeing now is just all the different payments that were made from that money.
Those were converted at the bank into personal use for Alec.
That's correct.
All right, we're looking at the second check for, how much was that?
$25,245.08.
All right, and that's made out to what entity?
Palmetto State Bank,
From the client trust account?
correct?
Did that go to the client or did that go somewhere else?
That went to Alec's personal use again.
All right. And did y'all ultimately have to make that right?
We did.
Last one is Mr. Hakeem, correct?
That's correct.
Is that in a companion case to Ms. Thomas?
It is.
You got two misappropriations, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Looking at this disbursement sheet, we have right here on the disbursement sheet, what entity is that?
Palmetto State Bank,
For how much?
$309,581.46.
All right, and that's signed by who on this?
Russell Lafitte, conservator.
And is that the check right there?
That is the check.
Made out to what entity?
Palmetto State Bank,
In what year?
December 2011.
Okay, and did that money go to the client?
It did not.
Did you ultimately have to pay that back?
We did.
And then finally, $60,000 for
The
opinions.
PR fee again. We decided to pay the PR fee back.
And that's the PR fee right there for Mr. Lafitte, is that correct?
That's right.
The one who signed that disbursement sheet?
That's correct.
You mentioned Russell Lafitte. Do you have a relation to Russell Lafitte?
Russell Lafitte is my brother-in-law. He's married to my husband's sister.
June 7th, 2021, you came in demanding answers about those Ferris fees, correct?
That's correct.
And that conversation ended because you got a call about his father, correct?
That's correct.
And the inquiry got pushed to the side because of the tragedy of the murder of Maggie and Paul, is that correct?
That's correct.
And additionally, Alec called you about having to get finances together for a hearing in the boat case later that week, is that correct?
That's correct.
And that hearing got canceled as a result of the tragedy of the murder of Maggie and Paul.
That's correct.
And ultimately, in July, y'all received an email from Chris Wilson saying the money was in the account, is that correct?
That's correct.
What did you later find out about whether or not all that money was in the account?
We found out after September 3rd that all that money was not in the account. Chris Wilson called us and actually wanted us to pony up the other portion of the money.
And what portion was that?
There's a couple $100,000 that was still missing.
And once, a few months later, your attention got turned back to these matters, and you ran that inquiry, then the whole thing started to unravel, is that correct?
That's correct.
Not further this time, Your Honor.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor.
You have an idea about how long you plan to be? So we'll take a break now for about 10 minutes.